welcome. I am Lisa Anderson. I am the president of the Apex Inland Empire chapter, and I'm also the president of LMA Consulting Group. I work with manufacturers and distributors to help them elevate their business performance. Probably the most notable thing about me is that I have practical experience. I was a vice president of operations and supply chain for a mid-market manufacturer. And then for the last 10 years, I've been doing consulting work with manufacturers and distributors. And I was recently named in the top 20 supply chain influencers by SAP. So that's a little bit about me. And remember to silence your cell phones. I remembered mine just a minute ago. And also your session evaluations. So you had one in your packet, and also I think there's some more by the door so that we can get feedback for future years. So all right, let's see here. Well, that's not good. Let's see. Here we go. All right, so this gives you a little bit more information about me, but we can just sum it up as I already have. Now, I'd like to say up front that, like I said, we may as well make this interactive. So I really would appreciate it if you have any questions that just throughout the presentation to raise your hand, because let's make it interactive and fun so that you stay awake. It's really bad when you have a presentation and people start falling asleep. So we're going to make sure that does not happen. And I have a group of folks from my area right here who are going to make sure that we all stay awake. All right, so we're gonna focus today on why should we care about customer service? Why is this especially important today, in today's environment? I performed an Amazon Effect survey, and I'll go through that, what I did and what the results were, and some key takeaways. So you walk away with something notable to take back to work. And then what can you do about it? I mean, it is what it is, but now what do we do to make that happen and move forward with priming your supply chain for success? And then we'll wrap up with some case studies, and if you have questions, we can just address those and look at some of your challenges and see what we can't solve today while here. So, only reason that you should focus on customer service is pretty much if you want to stay in business. That's pretty much where we are today, especially with the Amazon effect taking place. And what I mean by the Amazon effect is most of us, working with manufacturing and distribution, do not compete directly with Amazon. For the most part, that's true. However, they've changed the entire playing field that we see today. So we're going to talk, a lot more about that and what can we do about it, probably more importantly. So one of the things that I'd like to do is look across all my clients. I have clients ranging from $5 million to multi-billion-dollar companies, actually. And they're in industries ranging from aerospace to building products to consumer products. So across the board. If I find a trend that is true for all of my clients, and it's a real hot button, I take note, because one way or another, all my clients are either suffering or they're concerned about the same type of topics. What should we do, and how can I help them leverage that situation or succeed when everyone else is struggling? So some of the things that I see happening in today's environment, which really lead us to the Amazon effect, is that volatility is a new norm. And what I mean by that is, prior to the recession, a 100-point swing on the stock market was a big deal. Now we just laugh because 100 points could happen in an hour, and could be 1,000 points, and we wouldn't probably even notice or get too many text messages about it. It's just that's par for the course. So in my client's environment, I'm seeing that every day something is happening. Customers are, we're gaining customers go out of business, supply chain networks are changing, everything is changing. So just volatility is the new norm. We have to find a way to thrive amidst a bunch of change. Customer expectations are high, so certainly everyone expects more for less. That's sort of a common thinking, especially since the recession, when we pretty much during the recession, I don't know anyone, and I'd be curious if anyone here didn't either lose their job, get a cut in pay, know somebody who was struggling because of one of those reasons, or was concerned that they might have one of those outcomes happen to them, or if you're in a service industry, you're worried about gaining clients. So everyone I know had that issue during the recession. And so it's kind of carried over. So like if you think about when you go to the mall, everyone still went. But what happened is that they were now wanting more for their dollar because they had fewer dollars. And that's carried over into businesses too. So we're just expecting, you know, with Amazons in the world, you can find a low cost price. You expect that you can get more for less. But you also want it to be quicker delivered. You want it to be better service. I mean, we basically want more for our money is what we're looking for. Time is probably, I should have put this on the top, because if there's one thing all executives tell me is that I have no time. If you could find a way to free up an hour of my day, I mean, let's just start with 10 minutes. If you could free up 10 minutes of my day, that's worth a lot of money. But more importantly, you know, if you can help us deliver to our customers quicker than our competition, we're going to grow our business. I mean, there's several clients I worked with that a 5% reduction in delivery times, of course, consistently, but a 5% reduction would have grown the business versus their competitors. So it's a big deal in today's environment. So time across the board. You can close the books faster. You can make better management decisions. So no matter what, if you can save time, and for all of us, if we can save time for our employers, save time for ourselves, we're going to be in much better shape than we would otherwise. It's a new ball game for sales growth. So prior to the recession, you know, there might be a handful of sales folks in here. So with that said, that I understand that it's harder than this. Pre-recession, you somewhat had to pick up the phone, and many times you could receive an order. Of course, it's not that easy, but to some degree that could happen. In today's environment, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to find a way to grow your business, be smarter about it. People aren't just going, you know, yes, you may receive a call that somebody just calls and places an order, but for the most part, it's going to be a different relationship. You have to develop a collaborative relationship with your customer. They're expecting more, and they're expecting more collaborative relationships. Cash is still king. So my clients have money, for the most part. They have money. However, they're still, you know, if we think back to the volatility piece of this equation, if you don't know what might happen tomorrow, you're a little bit worried about how much money you're going to spend. So they're starting to become selectively interested in investing. So, and that's just a recent development within the last year. Prior to that, they had bunches of money, but they did not want to spend it. So now they're thinking about investing, but they're being very selective. You know, they're hiring people, but they're hiring somebody who has like all 100 skills they're looking for, and in one person instead of 6. So, you know, they're slow to return to the idea of spending money. Because, of course, cash is king. One nice thing we can all do is help them save cash, because supply chain management is all about, it's one of our key metrics, is how can we increase cash flow. It's also an information overloaded society. Certainly this relates to Amazon, is before you even got here today, most of you probably looked at your cell phones and had several emails. You had text messages maybe. You've probably received messages from your social media accounts. You know, maybe you're sitting here tweeting about how great this presentation is. There's no telling. But basically, we all receive bunches of messages. The only one you may not have done is, like, you know, on the way to work, you usually see billboards on the side of the road. Well, you probably didn't see too many on the way here. But nevertheless, those types of messages, we are just overloaded with them. And so it becomes to the point where we don't even see them anymore. So how do we stand out in the crowd with all these crazy messages? And how do we figure out what to do with all this data we have? Because it could be useful, but it's very confusing. And then let's see, last but not least, it's increasingly global. So we have to figure out how do we survive and most preferably thrive, because who wants to just survive in their jobs every day? For those of you that were in Jack Welch's presentation yesterday, we need to get a little bit more excited than we've been about supply chain. So let's think about thriving, not just like surviving. But in order to do that, we have to become more knowledgeable, because we're dealing with global requirements, certainly. And that's why, we have more and more global presence at this conference. But also there's, complications with rules and regulations. Certainly food, aerospace, all those industries have a plethora of them. And there's risk. Certainly, that's one thing that's interesting is in the last, I don't know, at least 5 years, maybe 10, can you think of a year that something didn't happen, like an earthquake, volcanoes, all sorts of natural disasters have happened throughout the world that have created complications for our supply chain. So that's just the ones that we can't prevent. But there's all sorts of wars and other strikes, port strikes. I mean, I live in LA, that was a fiasco. So, there's bunches and bunches of risks that can happen that we have to manage for as supply chain managers and leaders. And then sustainability. So, how do we make sure that we actually are green and that we are friendly for the environment? So that's a tall order. So this is a short list, although it's a challenging list for all of us that I'm seeing that the executives I talk to every day are concerned about these topics. And that's why they're concerned about getting the right supply chain talent. So why do we, what does this really mean? About 3 years ago or something, I used to talk about the baseline assumptions and said that's what we need to be at. But now they just are that. They're like safety and quality. If you don't have those, you may as well go home. So now, cash being king, service being paramount, and execution, without that you may as well go home. Execution is everything. Those are just baselines. So those just get you into the game. They certainly do not help you win the game. And that's the problem here. And that's absolutely the problem with the Amazon effect. So now we need to go further. So we need to innovate, and we'll talk more about innovation because that can take, quite some time. I don't want to get carried away on the introduction. And then collaborate to thrive. So collaboration is absolutely key in today's environment. We're going to talk a lot more about that as well. And then this one I'm not going to talk much about, so I will say something about it. And that's image will make or break you. And I don't mean your personal appearance, although that could make or break you. I can tell you a story about that too. However, I do mean your corporate image. Like if you are not a place that people want to come, do you think anyone is going to want to work there? Probably not. And actually, if some of you are in one of those places, you probably are thinking about getting out or you wish you could. So, and today, especially the younger generation, they will know all about you before they get to the job. So they will know if you're, an interesting place to work because everybody's saying so on social media. If you are not, and if you say one thing and do another, now at this point, everybody under the sun could easily know if they were interested. And certainly somebody who's thinking about working there will be interested. So your image is important. So we have to, this is really what we need to do to be successful in the new normal. All right, so we need to find a way. So what do we do with this problem? We need to find a way to provide exceptional service, which is certainly one of the Amazon things we're going to talk further about, at a high value and return for our customers so that they think about buying more business from us, and at higher margins for us. So it needs to be a win-win. And that, of course, is a challenge. So how do we get all three of these at once? We need to create a competitive advantage, and we need to think about how we can do this. And that's really, no one person is going to do this. It's going to take everybody in this room not only working at your companies, but actually collaborating together. It's one of the things I talk to my clients about frequently is, you don't know everything in your company. Have you thought about calling your trade association partners that you're working with as to how to solve a particular problem? Why work on something for 10 hours when you could get the answer from one of these colleagues sitting next to you in 10 minutes? And it sounds silly, but it happens all the time. So I see no reason to do that. I'd rather answer somebody's question, and then when I'm desperate, I'm going to call them and say, now that you helped, we'll help each other here, but I need your help. Tell me how to solve this problem that you're expert in. So really, it's our relationship network, and that's kind of comes down to what Amazon's about as well. This is a graph that I use for system implementations, but it absolutely relates in this case too. I could almost relate it to anything, actually. When you think about it, from a systems point of view, nobody ever uses more than 20% of their system, or at least I bet if we asked this question, 2 of you would raise your hand or something. The same is true when you think about leveraging our relationship network. Let's ask that question. How many of you think that you're leveraging, if you think about your relationship network across the board, your customers and your suppliers and all of the other departments in your workplace that you may sit next to but never talk to, are you really fully leveraging your relationship network to make your supply chain thrive? How many of you think that you are doing this? I imagine 20% of you should at least raise your hands. Well, you're either all dead or really need to be here to listen to this conversation. All right, so well, here we go. This is the relationship network I was talking about. So just think, it doesn't have to be really complicated because I want you to walk away with something you can take away and do tomorrow. But, start with your customers and suppliers. They're obvious ones. So if you're in purchasing, think about starting with your suppliers. It's easy. If you're in customer service, think about starting with your customers. And if you're in the middle, you know what? You could actually even start with your next door neighbors, and that would work fine too. And then expand from there to your distribution partners, that could be your 3PL or it could be your carriers. You'd be surprised what interesting information and ideas people like your carriers might have that you never thought about. So have you ever told them about what you're trying to accomplish and got their ideas? The same is true for your internal teams and networks. Those people in finance, they may know something. Who knows? So it would be a good idea to ask them. Really interesting ideas come out when you talk to people. And then I mentioned, this is just a simple view, but I mentioned one of the things I really would not forget about is the people you know through APICS, other trade associations. How about your ERP system? Most everybody here has an ERP system, I'm assuming. You at least have QuickBooks. You have something. Talk to the people who use those systems, and you can gain a lot of ideas from them. And that could be best practices, processes, or it could be information on how to use your system better. So leverage your relationship network. And now we'll get to my Amazon study. So the Amazon study that I conducted is with executives of manufacturing and distribution companies across the globe. And we asked them questions about what are you seeing as far as changes in the marketplace basically impacted by Amazon and Amazon-like distributors, people who can deliver tomorrow, next day, Sunday, talk about delivering by robots. I love the fact that they deliver on Sundays. That's pretty unusual. And that they actually use the United States Postal Service, who thought that they could be innovative, but they're their partner. So Amazon can do a lot of things. So I asked executives, what are the biggest takeaways you have from this Amazon study? So, since it's early in the morning, let's ask, what do you think they may have said? Does anybody have any ideas as to what executives might be concerned about? Nobody has any idea. I doubt that. Yes?
Well, it's definitely like the benchmark for at least reverse logistics. It's just like unparalleled.
It's true. That's true. Actually, I'm much happier when I can return something to Amazon than anywhere else. They make it easy. Absolutely. And therefore, I'm more interested in buying it because I'm not worried that I will have this problem returning something. A good point. Does anybody else have any other ideas as to what? Joyce is pointing over there somewhere. So, yes, go ahead, Sue. So Sue is saying the delivery model and how you can ship from anywhere to any place pretty quickly. And I saw, yes. And then
pricing is getting more competitive.
Yeah, it's true. So pricing is getting more and more competitive. And I see a couple of hands there. Go ahead. That, oh, okay. So yeah, so he's getting compelled by Amazon to have the same conversation with his customers. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Ellen. That's true. So communication links, as soon as you place an order, you get a response. Boy, do my clients have some trouble with that one. Yes.
General Sandwich, they just figured it out.
Yes, yeah, they just good point. Very good, yes?
The Amazon now, reducing the differentiation between what is the brick and mortar price and the online.
Yeah, that's true. So it is absolutely a wave of change because I lead another group of trusted advisors like CPAs, attorneys, commercial real estate, and to your point, the brick and mortar versus online capabilities has really mixed up that market because people go to stores but to look, not to buy a lot of times. So that's created some complications to be sure. Let's see, I think I saw another hand somewhere. Well, let's see. Yes.
They allow us to have like a consignment inventory, but they also they buy inventory, from us.
Yes, a consignment inventory, and they allow you to, absolutely true. And my Apex chapter, we have an Amazon distribution center in our area. We took a tour, and that reminded me of that tour. It was a really interesting tour, but they do the consignment inventory thing quite well. Yes.
One of the areas of concern is they are actually not the trader itself, but they go into, if you are a vendor and supplier, they see if they are very, so they enter into those markets itself, like they become private label.
Yes. So they're.
Their products, that becomes a conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's the challenge of the private label side of things, and that there's that they can become competitive in that arena. Yeah, good point. Yes, Farzad.
I would say go back to the image. If I were to buy from Amazon, I know I can trust it.
You're right, and I said image might not come up, but I was wrong. That's a really good point. So image, I trust Amazon, and I am sometimes suspicious of these other websites. I'm like, should I give my credit card or not? I don't worry about that with Amazon. Yes, Phil.
They've created a space where anybody could go into business.
Yes, that's true. So they created a space for anybody can go into business. So it has actually created more for the masses, if you will, and it's absolutely true. There's been like tiny little, and they showed us this when we toured Amazon, tiny little people that have started a business and they distributed through Amazon and they became, for their purposes, huge. The small person's purpose, who knows, 100 times growth. Is there any other people in the back, or are you guys sleeping? Oh, well, go ahead, Ellen, because I don't see any others. You what? Nope, there's no one else, so go ahead.
I was thinking about the recommendations that they make.
Yes, that's a good point. That's going to come up in the survey, and that's the recommendations. When you go to Amazon website, how many of you have not, or how many of you have used Amazon? Okay, yeah, I thought so. Actually, I can say I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on Amazon. Now, that might sound crazy, and it was crazy, but my house burned down in 2010, so you'd be surprised things you can replace on Amazon. I had sinks arriving, and some of these things you couldn't find in the stores, so it was, but your point is valid. So like it said, hey, you're buying this, do you need this to go with it? And sometimes I didn't know what was going on as far as what I was supposed to be buying, so that was helpful. Yes, anybody else have? Thought I saw another hand somewhere. Let's see, yeah, yes.
The Flex that they announced last week, the speed to delivery.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, so how do we deliver order in like an hour? That's what you're talking about? Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely. So I don't know if everyone here has heard, but they're trying. Amazon is very innovative, so they're trying lots of things. They're doing food delivery services, but she's referring to the 1 to 2 hour delivery time frame in the use of new models like bike messengers and who knows who. They're figuring it out, so we'll see how that goes. I saw somebody. Yes. Yes, you're right. And that's actually a solution as well. So see, good. Got us right into the next session. But yeah, building collaborative relationships is what she was talking about. Yes?
Customer reviews actually is very helpful in the reviews.
Yes, you're right, actually.
The amount of reviews they get is so big that it's very helpful.
Yeah, so customer reviews, actually a very good point, because I have bought things that I didn't really know anything about technically. And listening to the customer reviews, it was helpful. Because, if there's 100 customer reviews and 90 of them seem seem positive, it makes me feel more confident about what I'm buying. So that is actually really helpful. Speaking of customer reviews, I'm going to be having a book on the Amazon effect coming out at the end of the year that I'm going to give you an opportunity to win one of 10 books that I'm going to give away to this particular audience, to you. And speaking of customer reviews, they're great, so give me a great one. So you did that because I paid you. Paid you in advance, right? Who else is? I saw a question over here somewhere. I thought I did anyway. It's hard to see up here. There's lights. All right. Well, so that you guys, really came up with a lot of the same things that the executives did. So I'm going to show you like the key points and takeaways from that study. Well, and the bottom line is, not surprisingly, that customer service matters. It not only matters, but it's almost you really just can't even compete today. It's more of a baseline, which I did have it in my baselines, but you have to find a way to differentiate yourself. So 67% of the executives that I surveyed, and this is really manufacturing and distribution focused, feel like they have customer service gaps versus the Amazon-like offerings, and so in essence what that's saying is most people feel like, wow, I have a long way to go to not necessarily to compete with Amazon, but to be in the right game with Amazon. So, it's a game changer. And isn't that what I just did? Well, it's so important we did it twice. I got it. Here I have extra comments in the bottom. A majority of the respondents also use websites to display products and services. So if you don't have if your company does not have a website that can display products and services, it's really become a minimum. And more than that, I think we'll talk about it further here, but you have to have a way to be interactive with your website. Like you pointed out about collaboration. People are expecting today that even manufacturing and distribution, which isn't known for in the past, ones and twos, like shipping ones and twos and taking orders for ones and twosies, it's becoming more and more so that has to be one of the options, is that you distribute to the Costco's of the world and those kinds of people, and you distribute to, who knows, other medical distributors, which could be truckloads of things. At the same time, most, I would say all but maybe one of my clients, so like in the 90%, have started moving towards or already have the ability to order a small quantity, whether it's through their website, e-commerce, or some other way. So you have to start, upping your game. Well, and here we go. Websites are gaining in criticality, so you have to have them. And there's a bunch of gaps when looking at how executives feel like they stack up in this particular topic. Because you have to be able to do everything once you have a website, all of you have purchased from Amazon. So, of course, anybody in any manufacturing or distribution company has purchased from Amazon. They're expecting that type of information on the website. So they want to see what other kind of products have I purchased in the past. Maybe what was my last order. Of course, who here has not had a request for status and visibility in the supply chain? And Amazon does a good job of that, right? So they say, oh, your order has shipped. It's going to be delivered here. This is your tracking number. All those kinds of things are things that my clients are being asked to supply, or they're asking their suppliers to supply, or both. So that's becoming more and more important. Service expectations are rising. So, of course, we're expecting great order tracking, which is what I was just talking about. Where can we tell where exactly it is? So if I place an order with a manufacturer, and then something happens with one of my suppliers and I have to change the order, can I reach that manufacturer and say, not just that I'd like to change the order, but can they actually change it in their process? Whether it's in production, whether it's on a truck, can they find it? Well, first of all, can they even find it? That's many times my clients have many problems just finding it. But can they find it, and then are they able to fix it? Or do we have to wait till it gets there, return it, and then fix it then? So who would you rather do business with is really the question. So it's becoming more and more important. 24/7 accessibility. So, Amazon's there 24/7. You can place an order, you can typically chat with somebody, and if you have problems enough, they will call you on the phone. So they're not going to do the service sell where they provide value added about the products and services they're selling, because they don't. Those people don't know what they are. So that's where we have the advantage if you're a distributor. But they will answer the phone. So do we have 24/7 accessibility in our companies? And how many of us here want them to have 24/7 accessibility if that means they're going to be calling us at 2 a.m.? So it's a bit of a challenge. So we have to find ways that we can build it into our websites, that we can have alternate shifts. Are we a global company? We can have some people answering the phone in Europe while others are in Australia. Or you don't have to be a global company, but there's lots of options, is what I'm saying. So is there a way that you can provide the perception, which is all you need to do, that you're available? Actually, I was doing a ERP selection project recently, and one of the top concerns of the person that was selecting the software was, they said, well, but you only work till 6. What if I have a problem at 8? And that was a big deal to them. And they eventually, the supplier eventually convinced them that they were going to, that they have an escalation process, but that they would, more than that they would actually pick up the phone and call them regardless of the time. Because they were really not going to buy that software, even though they liked it best, if they didn't have that ability. So, they're getting pressed to provide that in terms of ERP systems, but certainly products as well. And actually, this reminds me of a story of my Apex board of directors. So we have one of the people in the audience here had this promotion, which was a great thing for him. But what it meant is that all these people who wanted education services were calling me. And I am not the education guru. He's the education guru. So they were all calling me, and I'm like, oh, God, I don't even know what to answer all these people. And I have lots of things to do during the day. So finally, I got this brilliant idea. Put all their questions on the website and refer them there. And it worked. I mean, now I still get calls, and actually he's taking calls, thank goodness. But we can refer them to the website, and all of our information is there, so I don't have to come up with all of these things on the spur of the moment when someone's calling me. It's a small example, but it's exactly what's happening across the board. Is people want information now. They don't expect you to call them back in 3 weeks. They don't expect you to not to know what you're talking about. So you need to have all the information at your fingertips. Let's see. So don't overlook the importance of increasing product customization. So this is where you, I don't know if you've heard of masked customization or configure to order type of products, but in essence, what I mean here is how can you provide a little bit of something that's different for your customers that meets their specific needs, but yet you make it the base product the same so that it's easier for you. You make a base product, and then if somebody wants red, someone wants yellow, someone wants white, they can have any colors they want. You can just make them the right colors at the end, or you can package them in a certain way for certain types of customers. So it's that type of need for customization is pretty prevalent. So the key for us as supply chain people is, no one here is going to be happy if we go from 100 SKUs to 1,000 SKUs, or you can multiply that tenfold. Doesn't matter. If you go from 10,000 to 1 million, those numbers are not good for us to manage. However, if we can do it so that we still have the 10,000 SKUs, but we have 100 million options, that's a good thing. That we're providing more options for our customers with less trouble for us is the idea. So a majority of the respondents feel that customers have become more apt to negotiate pricing. So somebody brought this up, the fact that cost and pricing is becoming key, and price shopping. Certainly you can go on Amazon and price shop. You can go to Google. So you would think that people aren't doing that with manufacturing today, but they're starting to. So you do have to be in the ballpark. So the key here, though, is you don't have to go for the lowest price. You really do not. I mean, most of my clients, the most successful ones, don't have the lowest price. But they're in the ballpark of the right pricing, and they provide options that are perceived value, and they can charge more. I mean, isn't that where we all would like to be? That we make you know, if we were the owners of the company, and hopefully you are invested in some way with, like Jack Welch was saying, bonuses, you know, you have career progression, etc. But as our companies are more successful, they're going to grow, and we're going to be more successful. And if not, as Jack said, get out of there. Go somewhere else, that is. So, you know, this is one of the things we want to be able to do is figure out how we can help our customers price shop and yet still come up with our products as the solution. And then most importantly, delivery and lead time expectations are increasing. So I would say that in the last 2 years, I've had almost all of my clients have come to me with the problem of, you know, they either cut back in the wrong places because of the recession and they have to improve their service, or they have to reduce their lead times. Pre-recession, I'd say, I don't know, 70% of my clients were interested in inventory, reducing inventory. Now, 70% of my clients are interested in reducing the lead times or improving service, or both, because they can be the same. And not that they're not interested in reducing inventory, because of course, the less inventory you have, the more cash you have, it's all good. But they need to have the reduced lead time so they can grow their businesses. So I would say that their customers are asking them for about a 50% reduction in lead time at a minimum. 50% is a big number. So 50% does not mean you continually improve a little bit every day and you're going to be fine. Unfortunately, in that case, continuous improvement is not going to work. So 50% improvements require dramatic changes or changes to your business model, changes to how you think, and that's what Amazon is forcing us all to do. Now, some of this is good, because if we can be that person that delivers 60% reduction in lead time, we can be successful. And there's many tools in the Apex Body of Knowledge that helps us do that. Quality and service must be an assumption. So that's just like to get in the game. And like I said, options are key. So you want to provide ideas and ways for customers to, you want to add value to your customers. So if any of you are in customer service, you probably are familiar with customers not knowing everything. They order something and they're actually ordering the wrong part because they don't know. Certainly in aerospace, that happens all the time. So if you can actually provide your customer with, are you sure that's what you want? Because this is what you placed last time. Or this is what I think you might need for the type of plane you're talking about. Maybe it's somebody new. If you can provide them that type of feedback, it can be invaluable to that person that's placing the order, because that could be a big mistake to do. So that's a simple idea of one thing that we could do, but there's lots of things we can do to add value. Let's see here. So tracking your customer service is no longer an option. The customer will tell you. So it's no longer us. We can say, oh, great, we're at 95% customer service. But if our customers are sending a scorecard saying, you're at 60% customer service, it does not matter what our internal metrics say, because something is wrong. And I have been to many clients that track customer service at 90%, and their customers say that they're much lower. So sometimes they could say they're higher, actually, but either way, it does not have to sync up. So you need to make sure that you're on the same page with your customer and that you're tracking things the same way. And I know that's one of the score elements, certainly, is to track metrics, benchmark metrics across the board. Not all your customers may know this, but that's part of why we have to educate as we move forward as well. But we do need to collaborate and be on the same page. And they will tell us. There's lots of scorecards. Even the smaller companies, I'm seeing more and more of them start to create, whether they create formal scorecards or they meet on a monthly basis, doesn't matter. They're starting to talk more about, what kind of service are you seeing and how is it going? If you're not capturing demand data, you're missing an opportunity. So what I mean by this is, if you're receiving, certainly many of us are familiar with forecasting. So if you're, what's your past history and how do you project the future? That's one option. And it's not as easy as it sounds, but in addition to that, if you can get from your customer what they're selling to their customers of your products, so they're not going to tell you all of them, of course, but if you can get information about what they're selling and use that information, that's one of the best ways to help your whole supply chain optimize its performance. reduce inventory across the board, improve service across the board. Huge amounts of success there. You can get that from retail stores if your end customers are retail, but it does not have to be retail. I've done this type of program with aerospace companies, with medical products companies. It does not matter. And sometimes you just have to ask. It sounds ridiculous, but you just have to ask. What kind of information do you have? How can we share information? So that if you give me customer demand information and I give you, maybe I'll run my forecast by you and we collaborate, that could be you can have amazing success. I have to say that 80% of the best results I get with my clients, which can many times be millions of dollars of either profit or cash or whatever, has to do with small changes like that I just described. It's not some fancy thing that I've done where I can claim to be this fabulous guru. I say something that's, the simple thing that any one of us can do if we execute it well, and it makes all the difference in the world. So these small things can be a huge, huge opportunity. So redesigning your website, providing more data. Oh, and you can get a lot of data from your website, especially if you have e-commerce and if you capture anything at all, you're gonna gain some benefits by having that website if you use it. I mean, just collecting a bunch of the data does you no good whatsoever if you don't use it. And then there's, so extending hours is another thing. So I was talking about the 24/7 accessibility. One of the things is how long are you open? How long can your customers call you? So there's a lot of conversations with my clients about staggering shifts and how can we cover more hours. Let's see here. Building out technology infrastructure. So that's absolutely happening. There's a lot of interest, and that could be good for all of us in here because there's a lot of interesting systems. But there's a lot of interest in how we can build out technology, and that could be ERP systems. It could be barcoding. There's lots of options here. E-commerce, CRM, which is customer relationship management, all bunches of possibilities. Now, with that said, spreadsheets are still winning the race, according to what the executives say. They still get a lot of data from spreadsheets, so they still love spreadsheets. But BI is gaining in popularity, and what BI is business intelligence, and it might sound like a fancy term, but what it really means is, obviously, you're tracking, your ERP system has bunches of data in it. The question is, can anyone access it? So if you just find a way to access the right data from your system at the right time, to make a decision, that's like BI and business intelligence, and you can go a long way by getting some of that kind of a data out of your system at the right time, at the right place. It's like the inventory equation. Have something in the right place at the right time, the right location, and the right quantities, the right everything, and you'll be good. So from the greatest challenges perspective, understanding what the customers want and balancing what customers want with costs are two of the key challenges. And that's not surprising because a lot of what customers want costs money. So many of my clients are worried about how do I pay for this and what do I do about it? And that's where these tools come into play that we're going to talk about is how can you help your companies make sure that you address those concerns. So, all right. And resources are a close second. So the other research study I did is about the skills gap. Is the other issue that executives are most worried about is where are we going to find the people in this room? And I'm like, well, come here. But they just can't figure out how to find high-skilled supply chain operations resources that can help them implement these types of tools. And so we have to get better at showing them that we exist, that we're here, and that they even know who we are. But that's definitely a close tie for their main concerns. Is I also run these executive roundtables where there's like 20 executives, CEOs, CFOs from companies, and we talk about the latest issues. We last talked about international business. And we have a variety of topics. Well, every single one, it does not matter the topic we're talking about, they always bring up the fact that they can't find I'm going to say can't find. They're struggling to find or have the right talent because maybe they feel like they have too many people, but they don't have people who can perform these jobs, so they don't have all the skills. So it's definitely a concern for executives, and we can absolutely fill that gap. So, here's a couple of the things that, I heard back, the comments that I thought would be nice to pull out. Customers want it now. I mean, really, they wanted it yesterday. They wanted you to figure out what they wanted for them and have it for them waiting. And my mom is like that, actually, because she has needs that she's discovered that she can get through the internet, but she really calls me and says, I need such and such that's supposed to clean out the washing machine, and I needed it, I forgot to tell you about this yesterday, so I kind of need it like right away. So I did that, and I called her, I said, you should be able to get it tomorrow. And she said, tomorrow? I mean, usually you could get it here like right away, today. So, and she's serious, and she doesn't know how to place any of these orders, but she thinks that that's the process, that's how it should work. So, and most of the time she does get that. So now I tell her, this item is coming from a different supplier via Amazon, and it says it'll be there in like 1 to 2 weeks. So I hope that you've planned in 1 to 2 weeks for your coffee. Customers expect 24/7 availability. We talked about that. They expect customization. We talked a little bit about that. And they expect over and beyond service. So how do you do this? So I think that it's really not complicated, but it's challenging to make happen. And that is, you want to create a customer service edge by looking at the sweet spot between your people, your process, and your systems. But that alone really isn't enough. You have to tie it back to your culture and your strategy, which means you need to have senior leadership input into this process, and you need to tie them in. And we can do that. I mean, they don't have to know anything about how we improve things. If we present it in a way that's, meaningful to them, like they can grow their business by us helping them reducing their lead times, they're going to be interested. So one of a secret to success, if you're somebody who wants to convince your executive team of something, is if you can find a way to tie it to growth. That's the #1 topic today. They want to grow their businesses. So how do you tie what we're doing to growth? I can think of a way to tie every single one of these topics that we talked about today to growth. So if you want any help with that, just email me because I can't go through it all right this second. But I can tie any of these to growth. And that's very successful with your executive team. So from the people side, Jack Welch really talked a lot about this yesterday. So, oh my, there's a hole here. Anyway, so from the people side of things, I would say the most important things to think about are empowering and engaging your employees. And I absolutely agree with what Jack said yesterday. People are #1. So although as much as customer service is important to Amazon, it does no good if you have unhappy employees providing this customer service, because they are not going to provide good customer service. So you really need to start with your people. And empowering and engaging employees sounds good, but it's not as easy to do. You do have to live by what you say you're going to do. And you have to provide people with like a guideline. So you don't just say, do anything and it'll be fine, because of course it's not going to be fine. But you provide them with a guideline, and I'll try to simplify, as best I can here so we can go to the next piece here. But provide them a guideline, and then, similar to the concept of lean, allow them to experiment within that basic guideline. And then you have to support them. You have to expect, if you're going to innovate, do you think that there's going to be failures? I see a lot of people nodding. For sure, not only should there be failures, but we should hope there's failures, because if you don't have a failure, you have not tried hard enough. Because, like Edison in creating the light bulb, I don't know the story, but I know he failed like so many times, it's not funny, before he finally developed the light bulb. Well, that's the way it works. Jack Welch said he had a terrible failure, early in his career, where he blew a top off a building or something. There's this famous Chrysler story for Lee Iacocca, and somebody made $1 million mistake that was a low person total pole, and they went to see him because they figured they were getting fired. After all, they just lost $1 million, and they made probably $30,000. And they went into his office, and he, similar to Jack Welch's story, but they went in and he said, they said, you know, something like, here's my resignation. And he said, are you crazy? I just invested $1 million in you. Get back to work. I mean, that's so true. So, I mean, really, but that's how you have to view it. Now, most times, you don't set it up so that the benchmarks are so wide that you make $1 million mistakes, because that tends to stress people out. But if you can make it a little bit smaller, you know, you may have to accept that month end, there's a problem with month end shipments because somebody was experimenting. That can't be that happens and then the boss beats them up over the head because they messed month end. If that happens, no one will experiment ever again in your company, because the word will get out to everybody there. And you've just lost your ability to innovate, because how are you going to innovate if everyone's afraid? So it's a challenge for leaders, to be sure. So the only way to really empower and engage people is to give them an opportunity to be successful. And if you're not in a leadership position, you could still create this culture within your peer group of supporting people, you know, believing in collaboration. So do you see your, let's say you're in planning. If you're a planner and you're working with a planner that does a different product line, do you see yourself in competition with that person? Or can you both figure out a way to collaborate to improve the performance of the company? Because as opposed to them thinking about which one of you to get rid of or promote, if you actually came up with something together that saves the company a bunch of money or helps them improve their service, it's not a one or all equation here. You both will have a great career path. So it's definitely collaboration. Those types of concepts are hard to do, but they are critical if you want to have the people involved. And then from the process point of view, we could have like all day worth of presentations on processes, so we won't do that. But here's some of the concepts. You know, we want to look at order fulfillment, service options. So how can you, actually if you can get a team together, a cross-functional team is best. And when I say cross-functional, why not include customers and suppliers and other people too? Thinking about the service options you could provide your customers that would help them. And you could even start before your customers and say, think of your internal customers. I bet if you actually went to your internal customers and said, how can I help you be successful? And what kind of options would you like to receive? They'd be like, what? No one has ever asked me anything about that before. So it would be, and then if you get them thinking that way, it's amazing what can be achieved. Seamless and easy processes, website returns, etc. But I would say some of the main concepts that you can utilize to with the Amazon effect that I'm putting in my book, so you can read all about them there, is lean certainly is one, because that's one way to get people involved and to improve processes. VMI, vendor managed inventory, is making a comeback. And I don't just mean where the supplier owns the inventory and so you don't have to pay for it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about collaborative inventory and planning type processes. So how do we work together to look at the inventory across our supply chain in a way that is more meaningful? And then sales and operations planning processes is another one. I've found in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of this type of work, that you can maximize profit, accelerate cash flow, or reduce your inventories to free up cash, and you can greatly improve customer service if you can get everybody together and balance your demand and your supply with sales and operations planning, which I think, so this is really what it is at the ballpark level, is how do I balance my demand and supply? And that's technically what you do. But the key to success, the 80-20, is how do I get everybody on that page of what this means? And that means R&D, finance, operations, engineering. How do I get everybody on one page? That's so much harder and so much more important than balancing demand and supply. We could probably all balance demand and supply because we're supply chain gurus pretty easily. Well, maybe not, but we could make it look easy to the rest of the people in the company. But getting everybody on one page, that's a whole other story. So how do we help them do both? And we can start by collaborating, because once we're collaborating with them, they're going to be more inclined to listen to us as we're talking about what we should really be producing, buying, what machines we need to purchase. It can be fun stuff. How many people we should be hiring. One of my clients, is their S&OP process told them, you need to hire 100 people by the end of the year and another 100 in the following year, and we need to build these supply chain skills. And offer this type of training and buy these 2 machines. That's a pretty big deal. And it's very exciting for the people in the process. Actually, it was the only time that I did sales and operations planning that I almost received a standing ovation from the executive team. And that's pretty fun. I mean, that's never happened before. I mean, they're happy with the results, but that was pretty fun. But that's sales and operations planning. And then systems and technology is another key topic. And by the way, if you have questions, you can bring them up as we go, and I'll also pause after this to ask for some more. Systems and technology is a key piece of the Amazon effect because, after all, one of the ways that Amazon is successful is with getting the right technology in the right places. And this has caused a whole complication for the distribution and logistics end. So if we have any of those experts in the room, what they would tell you is that have some of you heard about this omni-channel thing? I see some people nodding their head. So what this is that, of course, it's complicated. If we're typically shipping truckloads to our customers, which is what a lot of manufacturers do, ship truckloads or LTL or maybe some, FedEx and UPS, but they're still relatively large orders. So how do we deal with that in the warehouse? And then now we have this, we're not even shipping full cases, one of this, one of that, one of this. So basically you have this onesie and twosie situation going on, and that's a whole different process in your warehouse. So it's omni-channel is somewhat like, how do you handle all this in your warehouse? You almost have to have 2 or 3, it depends on how many channels you're supplying, types of warehouses within your warehouse. That's actually pretty much the best practice, is to set them up each so that they run effectively, because combining them doesn't work. So it's a really big complication for distribution and logistics professionals. And there's a lot more now. They have these fancy sorting machines, and typically speaking, most of us probably send your person to get the products from the warehouse. That's typically how it happens, right? So we go to the different aisles and we think, how can we be most efficient going to the different aisles? Well, now things have flipped over because Amazon, it's flipped this all on its head, and we're actually bringing the products to the person. So it's a whole different thing. But we could have another whole couple-hour talk on that. But basically, there's lots of technology that goes behind the warehousing side of things. There's ERP. I'm seeing a lot of increased need for ERP so we can better leverage our systems. E-commerce. I've mentioned it a few times, but I don't know if I explained it, just in case. That's how people look into it's like a website, like an Amazon website that goes into our manufacturing and distribution system. So we can have people ordering ones and twos of things. And actually, the e-commerce portal is also used by distributors in some of my clients' cases, where they actually input their orders, sort of like an EDI system, but it's not, an EDI system. So it can be used by the onesie and twosies and the bigger companies. Big data and business intelligence, we talked about that a bit, and collaborating with your customers and suppliers. So these are some of the strategies from the technology side of things that you want to be using to prime your supply chain. And before I go through the case studies, I want to ask the room for questions, because I want to make sure we address them before 9:15. Yes?
If I understand you correctly, you wanted to find out what the customer's expectations were. So you asked executives for their perceptions of those customer expectations. Why didn't you go and just ask the customers directly?
Well,
Sorry, and if you had done that,
yeah.
it would be very interesting to compare that with the executive's perceptions.
That's true. I mean, it could be part 2 to the process. So the way I see it is the executives that I asked them how do they see the changing business landscape from Amazon-like considerations. Certainly, a lot of them are thinking about how do they need to supply their customers, but they also have suppliers supplying them. So, but you're right, they took more of the forward view. So that might be a good part 2, because it would be interesting to see how the 2 go together. So there you go, next year's. Yes?
You kind of missed an acronym back there. You talked about sales and operations planning, which is SOP.
Uh-huh.
I saw SIOP.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you asked that question. So SIOP. So I've been doing sales and operations planning. Probably it's turned into 70% of what I've been doing for the last 3 years, because I found it to be so successful. And every single time, so that's why it's a really great question, I've always known it as S and sign, OP, so sales and operations planning. And I bring it up that way to them, and I tell them, you know, it's really sales, inventory, and operations and planning. And then they all have unanimously said, no, we like SIOP, S-I-O-P, because we want to not forget inventory. Inventory is a key metric. So they've all told me, although it's obviously in both, it's the same method. But they want that visibility from an image. I think Parzad brought up image. But basically, they want that image. They want to make sure that inventory is not lost in the equation. So that's why I started calling it SIOP. However, I still feel like what do you call it? Like split personality, because not everybody knows what the heck SIOP is, so I'm like using multiple terms to try to make sure that people know what I'm saying. What other questions we have? Joyce is pointing to someone, but I can't see where. Oh, yes.
Obviously, you're an innovator in Amazon Prime. Recently, Walmart started doing something similar where they charge a fee for the same kind of shipping charges and stuff, where Amazon is the shipping and also you throw in movies as well. What's next for Amazon Prime to try to pull away from competitors like that?
Well, actually, Amazon was first, and they're like the big dog. My opinion, which is just an opinion, is that they're going to have a hard time with anyone competing against Amazon Prime just because it's so well known. I mean, here we go with branding. Marketing and branding can really become, what they could do to lose business is screw it up, meaning like not provide the high expectations that we're expecting from them and screw things up. But they're very well branded where people know what Amazon Prime is. It may cause them to have to reduce their price or something like that. But so far, the Walmarts and other people who are offering something like a Prime membership is not taking hold as effectively. I actually know the author of a recent book she calls it the membership economy. And that's because in addition to this Amazon from a supply chain side of things, people becoming members of like Amazon Prime and other services like Netflix is really the thing. Actually, Microsoft went to this too. You can't even really buy Microsoft Office anymore. They make it so hard to buy. I mean, basically, you have to buy the service, and they make it so cheap. But it's of course, it's over time. It's a revenue model for them. So anyway, to your point, lots of people are going to try this membership model because it's proven successful. However, I think it's going to be challenging because they own it right now. So it's just a matter of continuing to innovate so they can keep owning it is the way I see it. They're great innovators. Yes?
You mentioned earlier that some of your executives were leaning more towards reducing lead time, delivery time, and getting away from reducing inventory.
Yep.
As they do that, are they seeing a reduction in inventory at the same time?
Yeah, actually, if you, like, for example, the sales and operations planning or SIOP programs that I've been implementing, the goal of every one of those programs has been either growth, like they're trying to grow their business and they need to figure out how to prepare their supply chain for growth, or it's been to improve their customer service. That's been the goals in the last 3 years. But in all cases, we've either kept inventory the same or decreased it. So yes, it's becoming more of an assumption. Like, of course, no one in their right mind wants to spend more money on inventory than they need to. But in some cases, though, we did increase inventory in the beginning in order to get the service intact and get things working. And then we brought it back down as we implemented some of the best practice processes. Because you don't just snap your fingers and like suddenly everything is done, as we all know, since we implement these processes. But yeah, they're still interested in inventory, but that's not their number one concern, because it doesn't help them grow the business to reduce inventory. It just helps them free up cash, which helps them invest in the business, which that part's good. Let's see, I think I saw another hand somewhere. Joyce, do you see any other hands? All right, well then we'll go on. I'll maybe talk about one of these. Let's see, which one might be most interesting. So let's see, from the Amazon point of view. So the building products manufacturer was somewhat interesting because that was during the recession, so it was before the whole Amazon effect took place. But they they were in the building products industry at that time, which is really a bad place to be during the recession, because the building products industry, like the people who supplied windows, doors, and those kinds of things for houses and commercial buildings, they all saw their sales decrease by at least 50% in the ones that I've been looking at. And so 50% reduction in sales is rather hard to deal with because you don't cut your way to success very easily. But this one was in the beginning of the recession, looking for ways to slash costs. And they had a pretty wide distribution network, lots of service centers, because the key to their business was they had to be competitive in terms of lead time, because if not, their competitor would take over. So we did a distribution analysis or supply chain analysis, and we found that they could reduce their inventory by kind of moving. It wasn't a complete pull system of any kind, but their number one supplier, they actually owned, surprisingly enough, but they had the worst relationship with. Isn't that always the case? And they couldn't figure out how to get the right, the material supplied by this supplier they owned. So they somewhat established a Kanban kind of system, but it wasn't a true Kanban, but it was a simulated sort of example. And that helped them reduce inventory by like 40%, which helped them stay afloat. And then with the distribution network, they looked at how can we do some innovative thinking, because we still have to deliver within 24 hours, because that's the point of a service center. Service center doesn't produce, their manufacturing plant produce, but they have to deliver rapidly, same day deliveries in many cases, and they had to figure out a way to do that while not having so much overhead. That's the problem. So they came up with some ways that they could collaborate with some of their customers, and how they could collaborate with some of their carriers to like go to a certain route once a day, and those types of things. So they found a way to cut back on their overhead so that they could further strengthen their supply chain, really, because they put less cost into it. So that was and they were able to achieve a 5% improvement in delivery lead times, which a 5% improvement during a down period of time. By doing that, and then they also better leverage their system. So it's a great example because they did everything. They were a configure to order type of product. And so if you get the right tools, if you always have the right tools, similar to the inventory, the right things, but the right tools in the right places, they had a system that helped them configure on the fly, basically. So like, how do I, what size do I want? What color do I want? Lots of options. So if they can configure it on the fly and then produce largely all the same, but just configure it on the fly as they produce it, they could make their supply chain run faster, and they could get it out to these facilities quicker and respond faster. They were able to reduce their lead times by 5%. And that 5% improvement helped them grow their business during the recession, which is absolutely critical in their industry, was the lead time. So it did not, sure, it mattered. I mean, this is a great example. Whoever asked me about inventory, I think you did. They couldn't afford to increase inventory because, after all, they were in this terrible 50% reduction sales environment. So they could not increase inventory, but they had to find a way to reduce their lead times, which sometimes can be at odds with one another. So this was a creative solution to get out of it. So it's kind of like, and to do this, it was the people at the facility already had these ideas. So it was just getting the right people together to collaborate. That's what I did. And help them figure out, okay, now that we have these ideas, how do we put the right best practice processes, some of the inventory methods, with some of the innovative transportation type methods together, the processes side of things. And we did a little bit of a sales and operations planning, a poor man's sales and operations planning, we'll call it, approach. And then we definitely leveraged their system to configure on the fly and put it all together, and we were able to get a result. And none of it was rocket science. It was really getting the right people involved. So that's kind of like the key there. So if you look at what's the bottom line here, is that service and quality must be an assumption. Going the extra mile is no longer a differentiator. So you really need to think about, how can I do something and how can I ask my customers what they want? Think about Apple. You do want to ask your customers, but they may not know. Like, who knew they needed an iPod before it existed? Probably not very many people. So you have to be listening for what they're not telling you because they don't know to tell you. And, brainstorming with more people, like the people in this room, to get ideas. Because it's not that they're being difficult. Many times, like people ask me, what do you want? I'm like, I just don't even know. So if I knew what I want, I would tell you. So going the extra mile is a differentiator. Time is number one, even though I put it number 3. So time is really key. Leverage your data and technology. I mean, you won't succeed without this. And I was interviewed yesterday with Bob TV, and they said, how much does the systems matter? And I said, well, it's absolutely critical. However, of course, with everything else, you got to have your people and your processes before the systems will do you any good. But in today's Amazon world, without the right systems in place, you won't be able to succeed long term because there's just too much data and things to go through. And then it all goes back to your people. So as I asked for any other questions, if you wanted to get signed up for my upcoming book on the Amazon effect, which will be out later this year, you can sign up on bit.ly/Amazon effect. And also I'll enter anyone here today that signs up for, and I'll send you, pick out 10 of you for a free book. A couple of my board members have flyers if you didn't want to take a picture of the screen. So I'm happy to do that. And any other questions before we close out on the Amazon effect? Yes?
You talked a lot about the configure-to-order model and optimizing inventory. I guess in my experience, sometimes the volume is still there across the object content to be able to optimize. What are you doing in the cases where you don't have that kind of volume or the analytics behind it? So I guess I'm curious as to whether you're changing the state of lead times to the customer based on that option selection, and if not, how are you doing it?
Yeah, so some of that goes back to the design phase of this. It's not always easy, but the more that you can design in so that it's a standard product, where the options are easy. I'm working with a client currently that's a vertically integrated manufacturer that delivers within same day, pretty much. And they do that by making the options simple enough by designing it into the base product, and also they have a fanatical approach to delivering within the same day. So if you get everybody behind that idea, sometimes it's a matter of asking your people and they'll come up with answers to it. But to your point, it's not easy as you have more and more options and more mix. But that's one of the best ways, is to try to design in as much standard capabilities within your base as you can. Yes?
I'm new with the Amazon thing, so are they forecasting and are they providing that information to the supplier, and how good that information is?
So when I went on the tour of the Amazon facility, they do the planning in the Seattle location. So anybody from Seattle here, be a great thing to talk to those people. But they did talk about forecasting, and they did talk about their planning methods somewhat. So certainly they have robust methods. They're innovative in all other ways, so they're going to utilize some of those. But like everybody else, they also are a big dog like the Walmart, so they're going to demand certain things. So what I find from these larger customers is you can actually collaborate with them by pushing the envelope with them and asking them more questions. Because I had the same experience with a monster healthcare organization, and we had to, the people I was talking to actually did not know how to do some of the processes and didn't have all the information. But if you asked enough questions and you got to enough people, you can push the envelope and get more information. I don't have direct experience with the planning folks at Amazon, but that's what I heard about them. Is that they're on that page anyway. Yes, I saw somebody over here. Yeah?
For an observation, for all of the maybe the great things for consumers that Amazon is doing that are driving the topics you talked about today, for their relationships with their suppliers, they've automated it as well to the point where it is not a personal relationship. It's very much changed the customer service dynamic.
Uh-huh.
And it's starting to influence other customers of CPG firms in terms of how they interact with their suppliers. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, because they're using more of the technology and less people.
Possible
Yeah, you know, actually, from that point of view, that could be, the gentleman there asked me, how could Walmart or somebody take over? Well, in today's environment, I mean, Amazon has proved this themselves, so they need to keep that in mind, and that is that you do need to use technology and leverage it because it's just so scalable. So you do need to do that, but you cannot lose the human element. So that's going to be, I would definitely recommend that you keep the human side of that equation, because if you aren't going to be able to answer the phone, you will, I mean, I would leave. If I had a severe problem and I couldn't get somebody on the phone, I would just say, well, I got to find a better solution. So that's going to become a problem that they have to work through. Is there?
It makes it very difficult to do business with that, to the point where you have to really weigh the benefit of selling through that channel.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also a.
The costs associated with managing that business.
Yep.
Really justify the sales.
You're absolutely right, and people have that same question about people like Costco and the sort, because the big dogs tend to make it a little challenging that way. But the ones that stand out, that you do keep some human elements, to be good. I see Joyce pointing. Yes.
You mentioned that you don't get happy customers if you don't have happy employees. Do you want to talk about the Times article about Amazon?
Yeah, you know what? That's true, and that is an image breaker, to be sure. Well, you know what? When I went to the Amazon facility, they were opposite of the article in the facility, and I think that they realize that they need to. It's a challenge to get enough people to run some of the facilities. So I can speak to the one I saw, and they were all about providing training and congratulating people on ideas. They were the opposite of what's communicated in the article. With that said, however, I'm sure some of the elements were valid, and some of it's because they're so focused on innovation, it can really have some of those detrimental effects. I think that they won't succeed long term if the CEO's philosophy is screw people, go to service. Because I've never seen a company last long term. They can last short term, but not long term with that philosophy. But as with articles go, you never know how much of it is true or not true. But I did see some elements that were opposite of the article at the facility I went to. So I'm hoping that's true, because they've created a nice model for themselves. So yeah. Any other? Yes. What? Oh, that's not good. Is bit.ly? Oh, that's not good either, but good point. I'll see if I can't make another one with your feedback that has a small a. Thank you for letting me know. Any other questions? Nope? All right, well, thank you. Well, have a good rest of the conference.